Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Inside D2Football. I'm your host, Brandon Meisner, joined by Chuck Bittner, Matt Witwicky, and Justin Paluzzi. Later on in the show, Chris Ferguson will join us. He is very interested in a CIAA game that's going on right now. Devin Albertson has the night off. So week one in Division II, we had a lot of great games. We had top 25 matchups. We had upsets of top-ranked teams, or of ranked teams at least. And we also had what I think overall was a great start to the 2022 season. But where we are going to start tonight is Allendale, Michigan, a game that we promoted heavily, thought it was going to be a great game, and it was. In that game, Grand Valley beats a nationally ranked RMAC team for the second year in a row. The Lakers won 25-23 and come from behind fashion. At one point, they had a 17-0 lead, only to surrender that lead. And then obviously they were able to come back and win that one. So it was a great game to start the season.
I don't think we could have asked for anything better to start off the season, Brandon. A number 5 and a number 3 in one of the greatest atmospheres in NCAA Division II football. And we really got the game we were hoping for, and we really got an amazing way to showcase D2 football for anybody that got to see that. It really was a defensive battle to start off with. There were really kind of multiple phases to this game, but it really did start off as a defensive battle. In the first half, Mines had 96 total yards. Grand Valley a little bit better with 155, but only 20 rushing yards. And I think between the two teams, there were only 3 third down conversions. So it was really a defensive struggle for both teams. In the first half, Grand Valley led just 7-0 at the break. And the Laker defense really continued to control that game throughout most of the third quarter. And really were able to set up the offense with some good field position as well. And the Lakers really took advantage of that. They had 2 drives that started near midfield. I think one of them was actually in plus territory, and they converted those 2 drives into 10 points, extended that lead to 17-0. And at that point, it really seemed like Mines just was not going to be able to muster the offense that it was going to take to get back into this game. I even had said so on Twitter publicly that I don't see a way Mines gets back into this without something special happening. Well, they responded to that right away. They went right down the field, got their first points of the season, got the first points of that game. And then immediately after that, the defense really kind of stepped up and was able to get the ball back a couple times. They get a strip sack inside the Grand Valley 5-yard line, convert that into points, and then to take the lead, probably one of the best drives that we'll see all season. They're still behind in the game at this point. They take possession at their own 1-yard line. And if you've ever seen Lubbers Stadium, or if you've ever been there, the student section in the closed end zone is usually full for the whole game. The students are standing the whole game. They're waving towels. They're making noise. And Mines had to start a drive on the 1-yard line in that end zone. They go 99 yards, score a touchdown, and take the lead. I don't think you'll see a more impressive drive all season than that. That was really something quite remarkable. And they really just continued to play really well after that. But to their credit, the Lakers responded to that after giving up a 17-point lead. When they were down to their final possession, they delivered. They had to go 80 yards, and a field goal wasn't going to do it. They had to get the ball in the end zone, and they found a way to do it. So just a remarkable game. So several gut check moments during this on both sides of the field.
Yes.
Both teams just put in amazing performances, and it actually did come down to a Hail Mary that was caught, by the way, inside the 5-yard line. Michael Zeman actually caught the ball off a deflection, but was tackled inside the 5. So and anybody that didn't enjoy that just doesn't have a pulse. That was just an unbelievable game. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. And again, we couldn't have asked for anything better to start the season.
I agree. And anybody familiar with Grand Valley football knows they're really good at stopping people about 4 yards shy of a game-winning touchdown. So that's a reference to the 2005 championship game, Chuck, if you are old enough to remember back that far.
I was at that game, Brandon.
Yes, so that all that says is that we were old. I too was very impressed with both teams. First of all, I was impressed with Mine's ability to come back, because I was with you. I did not think that they were going to be able to muster anything when they had all game long, and then they made a furious comeback. I think it's even harder to respond after that big comeback, and I was very impressed with Grand Valley being able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and let's bring on the winning coach from Thursday's game. Matt Mitchell joins us. And Coach, congratulations on the win. Obviously, a very, a great way for your team to start the season. A fine line between 0-1 and 1-0, but you got to be pretty happy with the results.
Yeah, no doubt. Like I said, 1-0 against a team that was a national semifinalist. It felt good to come in here on Friday after that game. I'd start giving so much credit to College School of Mines. They had about everybody back from national semifinal appearance, and they were incredibly competitive and tough. Chuck has got the best assessment of the game ever, so I appreciate that recap. But no, I think it shows the fact they're down 17-0 in the third quarter that they never had any fracture on that sideline. I've been on a sideline for 19 years looking across, and there was not any like doubt whatsoever in College School of Mines. And we obviously made some mistakes, but you got to give Mines a lot of credit, and they battled back. But I'm going to give my squad some credit too. It's tough when you give up 22 straight and you throw a pick. Your quarterback throws a pick after surrendering a lead, and they got the ball about the 25, and your defense goes out there in a sudden change, bows its neck, and gets a kicker on the field, and he misses the field goal. That could have been a turning point. We could have been in some serious trouble. Our defense really stepped up, and I thought our defense played well like the whole night. And we're really strong in our front seven this year, and got a lot of pressure, on the quarterback. But basically, we had one turnover there where we gave him the ball in the 2 and a couple explosive pass plays, and that's how you give up 22 pretty quick. And but we found a way, and we had a 2-minute drill to end the thing, and we were really fortunate. Jade Walker, I think a lot of people in D2 are going to start to get to know. He had 135 yards receiving us in that game. He went out with some cramping, and luckily we got him back on that last drive, and he came in and kind of made some critical plays along with Cody Tierney to get us down in that situation. And so, yeah, just a lot of fight and resilience on both sidelines. I think you see championship level cultures out of both teams and just the way they responded and react throughout the game. And it was a heck of a Division II football game. We knew it was going to be a huge test coming in here after they're going to the semifinal. We knew we have a lot of confidence, and feel good about going 1-0. Clearly, as most coaches will say, probably in these programs, we can look back. There's some things that we need to clean up. We went pretty much 3 quarters without turning the ball over. Then we had 2 critical turnovers that really led to some things and gave up some explosive plays. But I'm really happy that we 1-0 against a top 5 team and be able to go in and coach off the tape with 10 days of rest before our next game.
Man, Brandon, I think Coach actually teed up almost every question that we had scripted that we wanted to ask you about. So we'll get into that. But Coach, one of the things that we really like to try to do on this show is help people who are kind of new to Division II or haven't seen a lot of it really get a feel for what D2 football is like in different parts of the country. So for our fans who maybe haven't seen Lubber Stadium or haven't been there, talk to us a little bit about what the atmosphere was like for that whole stadium coming into kickoff. I know everybody was jazzed up for this, especially because you didn't get to have a home season opener last year, lost a game because of a cancellation. The atmosphere just looked incredible. Tell us a little bit about what it was like and how jazzed up everyone was for this one.
Yeah, we've drawn great at Grand Valley State. I think we've led the nation in attendance now for multiple years, and I think it's a combination of factors. One, we have a very very loyal fan base. Because of the success that Grand Valley football has had over the course of decades, we get a lot of season ticket holders that keep coming back, along with faculty and staff. And then our students are phenomenal too, especially when the weather's warm. The students really like to come out. We play all of our home games early in the year at 7:00. We have a very active tailgate, which is not a bad thing either. They really like coming out and kind of being able to tailgate. So in our whole athletic department does a great job, especially of a marketing department. They had this one as a whiteout, and I thought that was really cool. Kind of AK Penn State, and our student section was packed and it was rocking, and it rocked all the way until the 4th quarter. And I was really fortunate that. So we have a lot of this stuff. We have a great band. We have fireworks after we score. I mean, I almost kind of when I tell recruits about our game day atmosphere, we try to do a really good job of trying to make it like, the big time at Division II. And I actually think stadiums can get too big at times. I reference sometimes the Mid-American Conference. They may get a few more fans than us, but it's in the context of a stadium that maybe seats 40 or 50,000. It doesn't feel like it's crowded. With our capacity and us being at or over capacity, I think that really helps with the environment too. I think some people make a mistake having stadiums too big sometimes, and they don't draw enough fans and it feels empty. We don't have any of those issues, obviously, at Grand Valley. So, And, we aren't afraid to schedule tough games, and I'll give Mines a lot of credit. We're playing Pueblo. We played Delta State, and we played West Texas. I could go through the years how, we're not afraid to play people, and people that play us know that those are going to be big games. So I would rather play a team like College School of Mines to open the season than, somebody maybe that we would have a little bit easier time with, because I think win or lose, we got a really good barometer measuring stick of what we need to do, because we do play we play in a tough conference with defending national champ. And our region is extremely difficult with the MIAA, the GAC, and, the GLVC. This is a tough region that we play in. So I'd rather have us, playing championship level teams, so we'll know what we need to do to be at that standard.
Right. We've already addressed it a couple of times, or at least touched on it a couple of times, but you're up 17-0. You end up surrendering the lead. What do you have to do? How were you able, or your team, how was it able to rally for the win like it did?
Yeah, I think some of it is I really try to obsess in fall camp on situational football. I think just being a head coach again for 13 years and having seen a lot of situations, try to do a really good job. So, even earlier that week, we kind of gone over our 2-minute drill and had talked about some different things. And that's one thing, I told the team, as I headed into after the game, Brandon, I was like, we saw so many things in that game. We saw 2-point conversions. We saw 2-minute drills. We punts down inside the 1. I mean, I tried to fake punt that they stuffed, and we had so many different situational football. So I think we tried to do a great job of preparing our team for situational football. And the other thing is, we do work a lot on our culture. I've seen teams, and I maybe have had teams potentially in the past where when things aren't going good, you tend to fracture, you point fingers at other people. Things don't go well. And at the end of the day, that doesn't really accomplish anything. It's wasted energy. And so I'm really proud, because on the sideline, when your quarterback goes out there and throws a pick, it'd been pretty easy for the defense to start pointing fingers.
Right.
That situation went out and did it. And, same thing when our backs are up against the wall and we're starting that drive there towards the end of the game. I felt a lot of encouragement and support out of our defensive players for offense heading on the field. So, really, it was more than anything just about situational awareness, understanding things. I try to talk about as a head coach all the time. There's, 4 factors they always have to keep in mind as players and coaches: down, distance, field position, and time on the clock. And initially in games, time on the clock's not a big factor. But, when you get late in halves and late in games, managing all 4 of those, both as a coach and the quarterback, the defensive play caller, and for us, our middle linebacker, which really runs our defense, there's a lot of inputs coming in, and handling all that, I think, is just something you try to practice. We try to practice all the time. Last thing I'll say too, is I'm killing you guys a little bit with this. Is
no, it's all good.
I think this year for Grand Valley football, we have a balanced football team. We're not defensive centric or offensive centric. It may not have felt like that on Thursday. It may have felt like we're a little bit more defensive dominant, but I'm optimistic as the season progresses, you'll see some things out of our offense too. But I think that the whole, motto we use around here, iron sharpens iron, I think helped us in that moment too. Mm-hmm. Sometimes if you have a lopsided football team that's just centric on one side, then you kind of lose faith in the other side. And, after having that kind of defensive battle, as Chuck mentioned, which it was, our offense never really lost faith in itself, because they have had some great performances in fall camp and spring ball against what I think is a really good defense. And so I think that matters too. I try to have balance as a head coach on this team, because I do not want to be one of those teams that's really loaded on one side of the ball with scholarships or players, because I think at the end of the day, that creates some issues within your locker room. It creates some issues on your team. And then, when you're in those moments, you start to lose faith in one side of the ball. And I don't ever want to get there as a head coach.
Well, Coach, you talked a little bit about your defensive front a little bit earlier, and I wanted to ask you about that, because I know in the preseason, some of the videos that the athletics department put out, they had an interview with your defensive coordinator, Jim Lewis, who does a phenomenal job for you. He had mentioned that your linebacker rooms and defensive line might be the deepest they've been in quite a while. Now, that would be saying something at Grand Valley, but do you think we saw the evidence of that on Saturday or Thursday night?
I do, Chuck, because, specifically interior defensive line. I've been associated with Grand Valley football for 19 years. We're going to rotate some players in there, and I don't know that there's a big drop off. And that's kind of rare at Division II with 36 scholarships to be able to have that. Also kind of, allows you to have that depth and play those guys. It keeps you fresh when you have a hot evening, maybe a hot evening in Pueblo, Colorado next Saturday, potentially. And also, it allows you, if you get dinged up or have injuries,
right,
your season isn't on going downhill. So it's just one of those things. I think, I don't know, you try to have depth as a football coach, but there's always stuff happen. There's injuries, Sometimes guys are coming and going once in a while on our roster, and we've been fortunate that we have a really strong culture in all of our rooms. But I would say, like, within our defensive line, we don't have a lot of issues with, this guy's starting, I'm not starting. I think they all understand that they're going to rotate and play, and they're going to have their chances to play. And, so specifically interior defensive line and then the linebacker room too. And we've got some great leaders there. Abe Swanson is our middle linebacker, and he was a first-team All-GLIAC player as a sophomore, and I know was an All-American watch list, and it is well-deserved. I try to tell the truth to people, but I've been, a career linebacker coach, and he's one of the best that ever come through Grand Valley football. And so he is an unbelievable person, and he anchors that, but he can't play 60 straight snaps sometimes, and so having some depth in there to be able to rotate in and have some different guys play different positions, I think is really key. And so, I always think that I try to be fair and balanced, guys, but at the heart of hearts, I'm a defensive guy. And so, my attention is always going to be a little bit on that side of the ball. And, if you're bad up front on defense, you're bad. And it's just not much you can do to cover that up, And so we always really start with recruiting inside out. I mean, it's just, if you're bad interior D-line, your team's going to be bad. Your defense is going to be bad. So we're always looking at recruiting to try to fill those slots and find guys that we think can help us win a championship, and then kind of build our defense from the core back. We really believe in like interior defensive line and interior linebacker play and safety play. If you're strong up the middle, it gets a little bit tougher for the opposition to do anything with that.
Sure. We've talked about defense, and I agree with your philosophy about defense. For most of that game, your defense did hold minds, really made it hard for them to move the football. They had some success late. What did they do to have success late? And does that throw up any red flags, anything to work on there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any surprise. I'm not giving away trade secrets to any coach that watches this. We got some new corners, and, they are talented. I think that they definitely have the talent. They're just lack experience, and then, like I said, I think they've got some experience in fall camp when going against, our receiving core, but Mines, came out. They're very confident, very experienced, and I just can't tell you how impressed I was with the quarterback. I'm going to butcher his last name, but John Machota. You guys knew it better than I do, but man, he took some hits, and I've seen guys take some hits early, and he popped up. I mean, ripped his jersey, put a new jersey on. He just kept swinging. I mean, he just absolutely kept swinging. He throws dimes. You can just tell. I don't know the kid at all, but he's ultra competitive, and their wideouts have a lot of confidence in their ball skills. And I think that they started to, realize like we were really committing to stopping Zeman in the run because he was a Harlan Hill Trophy finalist, and they started to get to work a little bit on some of the edges, and that's where we basically gave up 2 explosive pass plays for touchdowns, really big ones. We didn't make them earn it. We gave up 2 explosives. One of them, they did a good job. They max protected, kind of ran a double move, and my DB fell down. He was right there, and he fell down, and he tripped, and the guy was wide open. And sometimes that's college football. Those type of things happen. The other one, really nice throw and catch, that they made on it. So, the scores that we gave up, as I mentioned, we basically were 2 explosive pass plays for touchdowns. And I think that's 100%. They did a good job as a coaching staff. They were kind of going to work a little bit on our guys and trying to find the things that worked. And we weren't garbage in coverage all night. We were not, but in a tight football game like that, you make a couple explosive plays like that, it get turned quick, and it got turned quick because those were 2 big explosive pass plays for touchdowns.
I think
Matoka ran for 2 first downs with half a jersey on, which is pretty wild.
The way you described Matoka, and obviously we brought you on to talk about Grand Valley, but you've been complimentary of Colorado School of Mines. You're describing him the way I feel that your opponents described Cullen Finnerty.
Yeah.
Did that strike you in any way that he's kind of like that?
I definitely see some similarities. There's no doubt about it. I was here as an assistant when Cullen played. Rest in peace, has gone too soon, but he was almost like a linebacker playing quarterback. That's the way we describe Cullen Finnerty. And I would definitely agree with John Matocha. He was tough. My gosh, he was tough. And one of those guys that, you just probably grew more of an appreciation with as the game continued on, just his resiliency and his toughness. And, I think clearly the leader of that offense, as I mentioned earlier, down 17-0, he just kept going on the field and kept kind of swinging. And you could tell in some situations how competitive he was. You guys mentioned on your intro to the game, and I've never really seen anything like this as a coaching staff, but 7 seconds left. They were down 3. It was 25-22. We were thinking, I was out there with our coaches. We were thinking maybe they're going to try to hit the sideline and try to put the kicker on to tie it up. And we weren't really in our prevent defense. But just to tell you a little bit about their team, I think this is very telltale. The running back Zeman, he was initially in protection. He sprinted down the field. I've never really seen anything like this coaching college football for 23 years. And they threw it up, and we tipped it, and he was the guy that caught it. That is the back out of the backfield guys that pretty much sprinted 45 yards and caught it. And luckily, I had a really heady player, and one of our redshirt sophomore safeties is a dang good player that he tipped it and tackled him. But I've never seen a tailback in protection run down and catch the batted ball on the Hail Mary basically at the 3-yard line. And I think that shows they've got a lot of veteran football players at Mines that have played a lot of football. And I think that showed up in some of those moments, especially on that Hail Mary at the end.
So, Coach, I have one more question for you, and I actually want to talk about your offense and some of your players. So did it ever cross your mind, or did you ever consider at some point during the game, you know what, I'm just going to throw the ball long to Ja'Day Walker because he's either going to come down with it or he's going to draw a pass interference? Every time you guys went long to him, he just seemed to make something happen. I think he had 4 catches for like 135 yards. What a special athlete. Talk about him. And I know he wasn't the only one that made some big plays for you guys.
Yeah, we feel like we got 6 receivers. He's definitely the guy though on the outside that we feel like can, stretch the field and do some things. We recruited him last year. We initially redshirted him, Chuck, and then I'm down with the defense, and he was just ripping us in scout team. And we had a couple injuries, and I think it was about week 5 or 6 that I pulled Ja'Day in. I said, hey, we're a little banged up at wide out. You've earned the right to play. What do you think about pulling your red shirt mid-season and playing you? And he never batted an eye and did it. And I'm really glad that we did it because he got some really good game experience, including some playoff experience, which I think really allowed it to vault him to be able to do what he did in that opener. And the stuff you see here is the same things we've been seeing in spring ball and fall camp. I wish I could have had him for more plays. Like I said, we had some cramping issues, which I've got to take care of. It was much hotter and unseasonably hot than we're used to with morning practices. But, when I needed him, we needed him. He really came back into play and made some plays. And then we've got our whole receiver core. We've got sophomores. It's just kind of interesting how things have kind of played out. And we've got these sophomores that we do a lot of trust. We do a lot of different things. We got fly sweeps, we short, long. I think we've got a good complement of guys that can kind of help things. And so they put a lot of work in. But, Ja'Day is that 6'4" guy that can kind of stretch the field. And, I give Mines a lot of credit too, because we were looking to put him in the boundary and throw, but they started cheating the safety over a little bit, which allowed us to kind of do some different things with some other guys at point in time too. So, I think probably for us, just taking a look at things, we have got to do a little bit better job of being able to run the ball. Overall, just kind of the way that I like to play the game and the way we're built. And so, we'll take a look at some of the things. And again, I give Mines a lot of credit. That front is a very active front, a very disruptive front that created some issues. And so, that provides some humility to get back to work and go. And, we feel good about Tariq Reed, our number 1 tailback. And then, I think Cade Peterson would tell you, our quarterback, who was all GLIAC last year, probably not the best start that he had to the 2022 season, but we needed him and the rest of the offense the most. They really came through in that last drive. I thought Cade played incredibly well on the drive to really win the game. And so, one of those deals, like you go against tough teams, sometimes you don't play your best. But I had a locker room with some guys on offense that were happy or won, but you could tell they're pretty hungry and motivated to get back in here and watch the tape and, try to get to work, because I know some of them felt like they didn't play their best football on Thursday night. And again, I don't want to discredit Carl School of Mines because they had something to do with that, but we feel like, we can play a little bit better and we've got to get to work to try to get that done. But it's a tight unit. It's a veteran unit. I would say veteran. It's an experienced unit. And a lot of sophomores and juniors in that unit that played last year for us that really played young, making the playoffs in the Sweet 16. And I think they're looking to build and grow off of that.
Well, earlier you mentioned that you had a philosophy of iron sharpening iron, even when it comes to scheduling. Obviously, you have a tough opponent next week, CSU Pueblo. Is that part of that philosophy? And what do you know about them? What can you tell us about them?
I think there's several factors with the scheduling, just to be honest with you, Brandon. One is, you guys know it, we've had some teams leave the GLIAC, and so we don't have as, we're not as robust with our conference scheduling. And so, we have 6 conference games, and I like to play 11. I don't like buys, I don't want to sit around on a Saturday. So finding 5 non-conference games, Brandon, it's difficult. It's really, really difficult. And so, there are closed leagues. The MIAA is closed. The GAC is closed. You guys know all the closed conferences. The PSAC only has 1 non-conference game. And so going out and finding them, it's a lot of times you're looking at the RMAC, potentially the Lone Star, some Gulf South, and you've got to go find those teams that have some of those openings. And so, I'm really fortunate we got some of the contracts that we did. And, so playing Pueblo, I've been fortunate enough to know just, again, through some NCAA stuff, whether it's Division II National Football Committee or regional conference stuff and things like that. John Riston, and great coach, is a national championship level coach.
Right.
And, I told the team today, I knew it was going to happen. Like, too good a program, too much pride, too much history and tradition, like Grand Valley. The year they had in 2021, they were not going to be okay with that they were going to work to get better. And just watching the tape today against Midwestern State, was obviously a 7-3 team that was ranked, that was dang close as a playoff team down the Lone Star. Man, they came out and really did good. Quarterback played great, threw for 396 and 5 touchdowns, was throwing it to they played a lot of guys on offense. I can't even count the number of receivers, running backs, tight ends around the field for Pueblo. They played a lot of different types of people. And so, definitely a big offensive performance, which has got, us concerned here, taking a look at the tape today. And, one thing I think that's always been a hallmark of Colorado State Pueblo football has been their defense. They've always been really strong defensively, and that, the run of the championship, they're strong. They've always had a culture of having really strong defense, and they held Midwestern, I think, to 80 yards rushing. So, yeah, we know it's going to be really tough. It's going to be a huge challenge. It's their home opener, so I'm sure they're going to be pretty excited for the Thunder Bowl. We've got to, travel out there on a Friday and do all that. But, again, been on some regional calls and national rankings. I'd rather, play good teams and have a high strength of schedule. Obviously, if you go undefeated, it maybe doesn't matter that much. Maybe it matters when you get to the semifinal. But if you get in the 10-1, the 9-2, or potentially even the 8-3 range, which I'm not saying we're going to, that's not the goals here. But if you do get in those ranges, that's where really in those calls, the strength of schedule matters, and playing quality opponents, even if you happen to take a loss, can help your resume. And so we're really fortunate to have the opportunity to play. In my opinion, I know Mesa had a great year last year in Western State, but certainly feels like, the top 2 RMAC schools and Colorado School of Mines and Pueblo, we got 1, 2, and fortunate to have those contracts.
All right, Matt. Well, congratulations on your win on Thursday. Best of luck against CSU Pueblo.
I appreciate you guys having me on and everything you do for D2 football. You guys kill it. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks for taking the time to join us. All right, that was Matt Mitchell, head coach at Grand Valley State. And obviously a great win for them, Chuck. But, you came out of that game very impressed with what Colorado School of Mines, and obviously Matt Mitchell was very impressed with Colorado School of Mines as well.
Yeah, I mean, every once in a while you come out of a game every bit as impressed with a team in a loss as you would in a win. And I think that was definitely the case for me with Mines on Thursday night. I thought even more of them after that game than going into that game. And I actually had them ranked number 2 going into that. So they're not going to move very far on my board, probably, 5, 6, maybe. Obviously we got to move Grand Valley ahead of them, but they're not going to move very far on my board. I thought they were very impressive. The defense was, everything that Coach talked about. Just amazing fight from them. You saw the talent, but you saw all the intangibles as well. And they actually outgained Grand Valley in total offense, 401 to 346. So they were able to make a lot of things happen. And this doesn't change anything from them. I think that they're going to have a great season. They're going to go forward. Obviously, Pueblo is going to have something to say about the RMAC championship as well. But I don't think this changes anything for Mines. They are exactly who we thought they are.
We kind of knew, guys, that they might have a really good team last year whenever we had Michael Zeman on, and he said he was coming back. And then you got the idea that, oh goodness, a lot of their players who could have graduated are going to come back.
Yeah. I mean, Chuck, Brandon, you take a look at what they did last year, and, you look at the Valdosta game, very similar game, guys, to what just happened in their game with Grand Valley. They were down, about two scores, 17 points, something like that. Came back, almost won that game as well. So they've got a lot of really good experience here, Brandon, over these last 2 contests that they've played against really, top 5 teams.
Right. One thing I really thought about, and I failed to mention this last week. I was talking about how Central Washington got to play Northwest Missouri and Ferris State back-to-back. I didn't even think and give credit like I should have to Colorado Mines, who got to play Valdosta and Grand Valley back to back. Even though
Right.
different years, that's an incredible experience for those kids.
Well, and Angelo the week before. I mean, you take a
Right.
look at we're talking about teams that are all well inside of our top 10.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's an incredible experience for them, I have to believe.
Well,
So-
and Brandon, I just want to hit on one thing too. The thing that stuck out to me the most listening to Coach talk was how it prepares them long term, right? And how all of these games that they're putting on the schedule is preparing them for the future. And
Right.
both of them, whether it's Mines or Grand Valley, you're talking about the playoffs and you're talking about preparing for a tough conference. The scheduling these games is huge on a lot of different levels. Even as a coaching staff, you heard Coach talk too about, hey, we had to look at clock management. We had to look at down and distance situations. And so these big games early prepare them for what's about to come down the road in the next couple weeks.
Definitely. I think that's what he said. I think that, that's definitely the iron sharpening iron, that when they get into the playoffs, they're not going to see anything that they haven't experienced.
Yep,
exactly.
Love seeing these games. We've talked about it before, and Coach actually even alluded to the closed scheduling in some conferences. But man, we love seeing these games. There's more next week. We got Ferris going to Lenore-Rhyne. We got Grand Valley going to Pueblo. So we'll talk about that at the end of the show. But man, it's so early in the season. It's so much fun to see these games.
Well, before we get to there, let's go ahead and move on to our second game, which was another game featuring ranked teams. And in this case, New Haven was up by 10 in the third quarter, but Bowie State was able to come from behind and beat the Chargers 25-23. Chuck, you were at the game. Tell us about what you saw.
I was at the game. I had a great time. My first game day at Bowie State. I've been to the campus before. I've seen the stadium. It was my first game day there. They took great care of me. Had a wonderful time. Really, really a competitive game. Again, another one that went exactly the way we kind of expected it to. Two really, really tough physical defenses. I'll tell you, there was a lot of really good size on the field. You don't always see that in Super Region 1. Both of those teams had some really good size. Very physical game. It was very hot. I think it got to about 90. It was sunny. It was humid. And I think that had a real impact on the game, especially towards the latter stages of the second half. And it really did seem to impact New Haven more than it impacted Bowie State. There were a ton of injury timeouts, a lot of cramping issues, and it just seemed to really impact New Haven a lot more than it impacted Bowie. And I think that had a lot to do with how, Bowie State was able to make some big plays offensively and rally for a 20-point fourth quarter. Maybe earlier in the game, some of those plays don't happen, but I think New Haven, and I'm not diminishing what they did. They played really hard and really well, but I think their defense might have been a little gassed in the second half. It was just tough conditions, and I think that contributed to it. So all the credit in the world to Bowie for their conditioning. Didn't seem to impact them one bit. Their defense was every bit as good as it was last year. I thought they looked phenomenal. And I think they really have something at quarterback. And I'd actually like to, get a little take from Chris. And I know Chris was busy with some other things, maybe didn't get to see this game, but Chris, I'd love to just get your take on, what you think this victory means for Bowie. I think we all had a lot of questions about, what they might be coming into the season. Would love to get your take on, how some of those questions were answered, what this means for them and the season and the coaching staff.
First of all, I did not get to see the game. And you know why I didn't get to see the game? Because of the paywall. Abolish paywalls.
I have to send you an invoice for all of the retweets because that was part of the deal. My tweets were behind a paywall yesterday. But.
Anyways, yeah, we had a lot of questions about Bowie State's offense in particular. And I think a lot of people were kind of wondering, oh, this is the year, if you looked at the first three quarters of this game, because they came out and, they scored early and then they just went really flat and they were trying to cycle between two quarterbacks. And then the fourth quarter, they just caught fire. I mean, that last drive, remember they went ahead in this game with like 9 seconds left and converted a 2-point conversion to get that final score. And I think that, once the Golak, DJ Golak kind of settled down in the fourth quarter, yeah, he seems to be the guy who has certainly won the starting job to start next week and probably beyond that. So, with all the turnover that Bowie has had in the coaching staff, and to be able to have another quarterback who, Golat was there, but he really didn't play, barely played maybe one or two passes last year, and that was it. And Larry Williams was the backup. So, for him to have won this opportunity and went out and lead Bowie to a victory, it is a big deal. I mean,
Right.
some of the other teams that I got to either listen to or see last night certainly have to be wondering, oh gee, we really got to step our game up now to continue to play Bowie, because it's like they're not missing a beat.
Not at all. And I think they have something there with Golot. I know it's still early in the season, but I thought he played very well, showed all the leadership that you want to see. I think they really have something there. And yeah, I agree with you, Chris. I think anybody that thought, "Ooh, this is our chance," Coach Wilson moved on, Coach Sewell moved on, a bunch of players transferred out. No, man, the road to the CIA championship still goes through Bowie, no doubt.
Yeah.
It was pretty surprising because they lost so much that it just felt like they were going to be decimated. And that includes number of coaches. So it was a very impressive win by them. And Chuck, you were there, but to me, just watching it and keeping track of scores and viewing it in the way that I could view it, it seemed like just took them a while to get things going. And then once they did, they were on fire.
I think they just stayed at it, and they were patient, and I do think that they kind of wore New Haven down. And I do want to give some credit to New Haven, because we've talked just about Bowie, and I probably sound like I'm disparaging New Haven. That's just not at all my intent. I gave them zero chance of getting back down the field the first time they went behind when Bowie scored to go ahead. They only needed a field goal to retake the lead. I gave New Haven zero chance of getting down the field and getting points, and they did that. And then really put Bowie back on the ropes, and obviously, to their credit, they responded too. So, much like the Mines and Grand Valley game, it was just two teams that just battled their asses off for 60 minutes to try to win that game. Ranked teams who scheduled aggressively. There's a risk in scheduling those games, but love to see that happening. I think it's actually going to work in New Haven's favor by the end of the season, because Bowie's going to be a 8, 9, 10 win team. It's actually going to help New Haven, because I think New Haven's going to walk away with the Northeast 10. With your projection for them to win the region could still happen. So I think actually even losing this game, I think it helps New Haven. I think it's awesome they played. Thanks for rolling those photos. Those were some beautiful photos that we got to see while we were talking. So thanks for rolling through those.
The photographer got lucky, apparently.
Chuck, let me ask you, you kind of mentioned the fact that I had picked them to win Super Region 1. Once they got up 2 scores, do you think that they had a lot of pressure, knowing that, the weight of me picking them to be the favorite in SR1 really kicked in at that point?
Well,
it's my assumption, but I just want you to tell me.
Kind of a comical take on it, but New Haven wanted this game bad. I mean, you could kind of tell from some of the preseason press that was coming out.
Right.
They were not happy with their performance when this game was in New Haven a year ago, and Bowie really humbled them and won on their field. They did not like that, and they wanted to go down and have a good performance, and they really wanted to win that game. And when they came out of the dressing room, they were fired up. And the way the game kind of settled into a defensive struggle, they lost a little bit of that intensity that you see on the sidelines. They got a score right before the half, and I thought, that could really change this game, because now all that excitement factor is back. And when they come out of the dressing room again for the second half, they're going to have all that swagger that they had at the start of the game. And that's exactly what happened. And they scored again in the first minute of the second half. So, no, I think they actually played really loose. I think that they had a good game plan. They played really hard. They just made a few, didn't make as many plays as Bowie did.
Right.
All right. Let's go ahead and move on to a third game of interest last week. It was on Thursday. Unranked Minnesota State took advantage of numerous Bemidji mistakes to earn a 37-34 win on the road. Feel like it's a back and forth game that probably could have gone either way.
Absolutely. It was a great game, Brandon. Taking a look at it, right from the get-go, the teams are both scoring right away, kind of high flying. You know, you take a look at you got Bemidji was able to get a big score right away early, go ahead and get themselves out an early lead. Mankato's battling back and forth, wasn't able to establish the run like Mankato really wants to. And so they were challenged a little bit, having to go to the air a little bit more than they wanted to. And, you know, then I take a look at Bemidji. They were throwing the ball a lot like we know that they're going to. They also wanted to establish run a little bit more too, but neither team was able to. You see a pick six right here by Elijah McGee, who had a scoop and score for a touchdown and a pick six, along with 8 tackles. So he had a heck of a game. Brennan Bolio right here for a score. You can see why he's one of our Elite 100 guys, just a fantastic player. A lot of people there for Bemidji for this one. You know, big game up there right away. You see Sage Booker score one more time. Jalen Fry, the running back who had come back for them after injury, didn't have much impact in this game. I'm sure he will in the future here. That's a 4th and 18 conversion right there, Brandon, that we're looking at with Jalen Sample, another one of our Elite 100 guys.
I thought that was a key play.
Yeah, and then he catches one in the corner of the end zone, takes it away from a Bemidji defender that probably could have been a pick. So it became a wild last 2 minutes of the game after Mankato had actually been up 30-13 at halftime, and then a pick to seal it right there at the end. Pass rush gets to Alt, and he had to get rid of the ball very quickly. So, you know, when I take a look at the game in total, Brandon, it kind of went back and forth with Bemidji, you know, finding themselves down 30-13 at half. They put the ball on the deck 6 times in this football game, lost it twice, but it just kind of shows that they were in a lot of sloppy execution in their first game. 3 interceptions as well, along with allowing a few big returns for Mankato. So, you know, Bemidji's got to be kicking themselves a little bit with that. But at the same time, Mankato was able to go ahead and make plays when they really needed to. They were down at the right before, you know, with 2 minutes left. They were down 34-30. They hadn't scored in the second half. They lost their starting quarterback at halftime, along with their starting halfback. So they were kind of in survival mode a little bit there, and were able to go ahead and find a way to win this football game. And, you know, that kind of brings up a little bit of my thought of, you know, last year Mankato does not win this football game. They don't find a way to pull this out. They were 6-5 team last year. That makes you wonder a little bit is, you know, maybe are they back from a down year? And at the same time, it puts Bemidji immediately right in the hole there in a game where they outgained Mankato by almost 100 yards. Frankly, outplayed them for a good portion of the game. But, you know, Mankato was able to go ahead and make the most out of all those chances they had, and they came away with the W up there.
What are your thoughts about Bemidji then? I know you kind of touched on it, but in some ways I feel like they were the better team. But, you know, the football gods have a way of punishing you when you don't take care of the ball. But I don't know that they're not better than Mankato.
You know, it's kind of hard for us, Brandon, not to have an overreaction after 1 week, after we've been waiting for football, as long as we have. And we've been talking about football a lot, even though we haven't any games played yet. It's too early for me to really guess at that. But I think that Bemidji did not play poorly. They just didn't have good ball security. And at the same time, Mankato comes away 1-0, but I have mixed thoughts about them because I didn't think offensively they did what they wanted to be able to do. They weren't able to establish the run like they wanted to and forced them to the air, which is not something they're terribly comfortable with, but they made enough plays to win the game, especially on the defense and special teams.
Well, we'll have time to talk about this later, but Bemidji obviously can't be happy starting season 0-1 when they were a team last year, scored 34, gave up 31. Very small margin for error last year.
Right.
And that was something we talked about. They needed to improve on defense. This Bemidji, in my opinion, kind of needed this one. It's not over for them, but it really puts them behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of why I have the mixed thoughts, Brandon, because they gave up 37 points, but 2 of them were defensive scores. One of them, they literally fumbled a punt at their own 4. So that's kind of 3 scores that are not
Right.
really, on the defense per se. So it's really kind of hard to assess things in what ended up being such a wild game.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and move on, folks. Super Region 1 had a very good game, and what some might have called an upset, others would not have called an upset. Notre Dame went on the road, and Ashland dominated the first half, and the Falcons were not able to claw back into it, and Notre Dame fell on the road at Ashland, 31-14. Chuck, last week when we were doing our pick 'em, you had mentioned that you really thought there was a good chance even that Ashland would win the football game, or
Yeah,
at least could win the football game. What were you seeing?
Yeah, I didn't quite have the guts to pull the trigger on picking them to win it, but I had a strong feeling that they could, and it didn't really have anything to do with Notre Dame. I just felt that Ashland might be a team that's going to really fly under the radar. Um, they had played the second half of 2021 without their starting quarterback, Austin Brenner, who had gotten hurt and missed a bunch of time. And I felt that they had some really good defensive players that that maybe the rest of the country didn't know about, but that could really make some noise in the GMAC this year. So I just really felt that they were going to have a strong chance at home. I think I mentioned when these two teams played in the opener last year, it was an overtime game. And Notre Dame had special teams touchdowns and defensive touchdowns that really kind of got them over the hump to win that. So I just felt that Ashland was going to be really motivated and have a good game plan for this. I did not think that they would dominate the first half the way they did. It was 17-0 at the half, and just putting them in a hole really, it was just too much to come back from. Notre Dame really did play well in the third quarter. They got it down to 17-14, stole a little bit of the momentum, and looked like they were going to have a good chance, but it was just too much to come back from. Ashland had 323 rushing yards most of the game since 2016. So, they really played well at the line of scrimmage, and it really hurt Notre Dame that Tyrus Dickerson did not play. That was unexpected, and nothing was really said about why that occurred. We don't have an explanation for that. He was their leading rusher. So they did still do pretty well on the ground with Idris Lawrence, but when you lose your top guy and that just wasn't expected, I think that was a lot to work against. And great win for Ashland. I did have them pegged in my preseason column as a team that could upset the establishment in the GMAC. And I stand by that. I think that just really validated that, and I'm kind of excited to see where Ashland can go with this win. Probably doesn't change much for Notre Dame. They probably still are the favorite to win the Mountain East. Frostburg will be good. There'll be a couple other teams that might contend, but I don't think it changes a whole lot for Notre Dame. But I think it's really a season changer for Ashland.
Okay. And our final featured game last week, the number 1 team in the land, Ferris State, pulled away late to secure a win in what was a relatively close game throughout. They win 36-20 over Central Washington, and I guess the Bulldogs just keep on rolling, Matt.
Yeah, when in coming into this game, we weren't sure exactly what would happen with Central Washington being a team that we don't get a chance to see a ton of, just with them being out west, and then being able to go ahead and see a little bit of them against Northwest, at the end of this season, and then this game gives you a much better idea of who they are, and they're a team that can defend and can limit teams in the run. Now you see Xavier Wade with a nice long score there, but in the first half we ended up looking at a game that was 20-13 at halftime. Ferris up. So while Ferris has kind of dominated everyone for the better part of last year, that wasn't really the case in this football game. Malik Mitchell, the quarterback, for Ferris, had himself a good game, threw a little bit more than what we would have seen with the squad last year. You also see it, they're still always so dangerous with the jet sweep, as you can see right there as Taylor scores. A team that we've always talked about all the eye candy they have. And Evan Cummins right here, I mean, he's such a a burly quarterback. He's kind of difficult to handle sometimes in this short of quarters, and he's able to score from close for them. But to the credit of Central Washington, they held Ferris to 3 yards a carry offensively. I don't think we've seen a whole lot of teams, Brandon, who have been able to do that with a Ferris team that kind of plays bully ball to some extent.
Right.
You see Malik Mitchell right here. You can see the athlete he is right here in space, where he's able to go ahead and just kind of gets out the back door on that with an easy score. He's just able to do so much for them. And then you go ahead and once again, as we were talking about, they aired it out 36 times this game, which is more than what we're used to seeing from them. But at the same time, they were still able to go ahead and win this game by 2 scores. And with a fair amount of new parts and so forth, especially on the offensive line, I think that they were, they felt okay with a game where they were tested, Brandon.
Sure. I think, at least judging from the outside, the test is probably good. Not that they won't get it, but they didn't get tested at all last year. And I, again, it's game one. Don't overreact, because everybody has a tendency to overreact. But it looks like it won't be quite the sledding won't be quite as easy as it was last year for Ferris.
That's the first thing I think that most people are going to walk away with, at least after this week. They almost had 500 yards offense. They only gave up about 230 yards offense. So some of the stats almost feel like this game felt like it should have been more one-sided than it was. But, Central Washington hung in there at a place that not a lot of teams are going to go and do real well there.
Well, Matt, let's actually bring on somebody who was actually at the game and actually would probably have had a great view of the game. Friend of Inside D2Football and D2Football.com, Sandy Golston joins us. Sandy, thanks a million for being with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. The honor is great. Everybody's, asking me, like, what are you going to say? What are you going to say? I'm like, I don't know. I find out when they ask me stuff. I'll figure it out. So.
Those are always the most fun. So, Sandy, for the first thing that we probably need to address, Ferris State set a high standard last year. Dominant in every game. One of the best runs probably ever in the playoffs in terms of dominance, margin of victory. Are they a victim of the standard that they set? Is that happening this year?
I think to some extent that probably could happen. It's probably inevitable. When you look at the run that we had against the caliber of competition that we played in the playoffs, we played some great opponents to get to that first national championship. And so that set the expectation high. And another expectation that I think was set kind of high was the way that we ran the football. We ran the football with such dominance really throughout the season. And so when you see that, and then, you look at it, and we're running 2.5 to almost 3 deep on the offensive line, and you have to replace some of those guys, it makes it look very different. But, one thing I think that people did not see last year that they're seeing a little bit more this year, and you guys alluded to it before you brought me in, was that, we have 4 really good receivers. And we had 5 last year with Cy Barnett, who's no longer with our team. So I think people are getting a chance to see some of those guys because of the way that we've changed our offense a little bit. And you saw Mitchell with, his performance throwing the football. So I think it's going to be a different Ferris team. I talked to you guys down in Texas, and this was one of the things I was alluding to that I thought we were going to see coming into this year.
Let me ask, we talked about Central Washington a moment ago. They obviously, their last 2 contests, pretty tough ones at Northwest. And then obviously at Ferris, they were able to hang around, when we're down, 2 scores, mid 4th quarter in this game, something like that. What did you see in them that was enabling them to be able to hang around with the top team in the country?
Well, to credit them, I think, their line play was good. And I think particularly their defensive line play, that was probably one of the lowest rushing outputs that we've had in quite some time. And so I give them a lot of credit. They did a good job of rushing the gaps, and they made it a little tougher for us to run the sweep. Again, we have a young offensive line, very talented offensive line, but a young offensive line. And so I give them credit, Central Washington. By the way, I said that these first 2 games were going to be challenging games for us. So I was not surprised that the game was close. because Central Washington came in. They have a good running back. They ran the ball at times well against us, and we have a very good defense at all three levels. So they did a good job there. But to be honest, we had 119 yards in penalties. We really hurt ourselves, and two penalties in particular almost directly cost us points. And so we hurt ourselves with some penalties. So those are things that, we're going to have as a point of emphasis to improve going into Lenore-Rhyne.
Saying this defense for Ferris looks like they're going to be plenty of the story this year. Do you think that maybe there's a chance that they kind of get looked at equally as a part of the success like the offense? I think a lot of people looked at the offense last year for Ferris. Do you think that maybe that's going to be a much bigger part of the story this year?
Yeah, I think so. We had with Jared Bernhardt exploding in that first game against Findlay, really right off the bat with the long touchdown run, and then the legend was born. And so I think there's a lot of eye candy offensively in the way we rushed the ball with such dominance, and then the receivers that we had. I think people just were really zoned in on the offense, and rightfully so, because the offense was really performing particularly well. But you look at it and what we have coming back defensively, maybe the best secondary we've ever had on our team. So we're really excited about that, the depth and talent that we have at secondary. We've had to replace our linebackers, but we've got young, very talented linebackers, so we lose some experience. But, you got some athletic guys that are really good there. And we've got some key players back on the defensive line, Caleb Murphy, Ian Hall on the edges. Oladipo is a tremendous defensive lineman. So we feel pretty good about some of the pieces that we have really at all three levels, again, on defense. And so defense, I think, is going to get a little better look this year. And they're going to have to because, they're going to be, when you don't run the ball as dominant as we do, there could be some drives where there will be some 3 and outs, or maybe there will be some shorter drives where you might not necessarily be able to have those time-consuming drives where you just punish a team all the way down the field and then punch it in from 1 or 2 yards out.
Let me ask you a little bit more about on the offensive side. You guys threw the ball 36 times. The most that you guys threw the ball in that playoff run was 22 times in any given game. So you already kind of know where I'm going with this. Is this going to become more of the new normal with the Ferris offense, where maybe you're striking more of a balance between run and pass? Do you think maybe that coach felt the need to go to the passing game a little bit more, simply just because you guys didn't need to in those dominant games, last season?
Yeah, I think you coach to what your strengths are, and last year our strength was really the dominance in terms of running the football with our offensive line and bringing in multiple tight ends and just running that power set when we got in those goal line situations. And so that was something that we definitely played to. But coming into this year, I think we knew we were going to open things up probably a little bit more to kind of get our guys in space and let them attack a little bit more from that. So to answer your question directly, I think Coach Anise does a good job of adjusting to what we have and the strengths of what we have with Malik Mitchell, who can also run the ball, I think, better than some people thought. I think he showed that a little bit last year in the Northwest Missouri game, where he had to really step in there for Jared Bernhardt. But you're seeing here now that he can throw that football. He showed it a little bit last year in the Northwood game, where he set all kinds of records. But I think this is the team that we have, and we're going to cater to the strengths. And we got a young offensive line that's going to come around. It's going to be some growing for them, but as they come around, then maybe you will see maybe a little bit more of that dominant running game. But I think we'll be a little bit more balanced this year, certainly than what you saw in the playoffs.
You alluded to it earlier, Sandy. You guys are now making a trip down to North Carolina to go ahead and play Lenore-Rhyne, 1-0 squad, ranked, one that's got a lot of history behind it as well. What do you know so far about the 2022, Lenore-Rhyne squad you have in front of you?
Yeah, I'm looking at them a little bit, and I know they were using a couple different quarterbacks, and the first quarterback had a little bit struggles early in the game, and it sounded like they went to a second quarterback, and he was able to stabilize a little bit, and they kind of got into a little bit more of a groove in that game. They got a solid running back. They got some experience coming back on the offensive line. Defensive line, they got some losses that they're trying to replace on the defensive line, but this is a good team. I think they're going to be. They played well, certainly against Virginia State, and so they're playing with a lot of confidence. I saw they did a big renovation of their stadium, so they got that going, and so there's going to be a lot of enthusiasm going down there. Going to be a long road trip for us. We've made some long road trips, as Coach said earlier. You got to schedule what's there, and the GLIAC is shrunk, and so we went out to Seattle to play Central Washington. We've gone to a lot of different places. We're going to be going to Montana. So there's a lot of things that you have to do to play. But at the same time, so you're balancing the necessity of having to play, find games where you can get them. And at the same time, you want to play tough competition to be ready for the GLIAC, because the GLIAC is a grind. It's tough.
Sandy, if Ferris has an Achilles heel this year, what is something that would potentially derail another great Ferris State season? What do they need to work on?
Well, I think one thing, penalties, we had some issues with penalties at times last year. And we had some today. If you say, was it in any one particular area? Well, not really. I mean, they were kind of across the board in terms of some sharpness things, but I think those are things that'll improve over the course of the season. You can clean those kind of things up. And I think the offensive line is going to learn. They're going to grow. They're going to get better. But there's a lot of youth there. I mean, we lost a ton on our offensive line last year. Some outstanding players on that offensive line. Zeno B was a guy that could have come back. He didn't come back. He took a shot at the NFL. And so we've got a lot of young guys. Adam Sealer, the brother of NFLer Zach Sealer, he's the anchor of our offensive line, so he's back. And we got some other young guys that have been in the program. They banged against our defensive line. So they talk about iron sharpening iron. So you hope that's going to pay off for those guys as the course of the season. But I think those are a couple areas. But I think it's a couple tough games to start. So not every game is going to be a huge blowout, like it was last year. And so it's you got to manage your expectations and let this team set its own identity.
If people don't know, you're part of the broadcasting crew at Ferris State. And obviously you want Ferris State to win. Obviously it's much better for your blood pressure if they're up by 3 scores in the fourth quarter. But nonetheless, this early schedule does make for more entertaining games.
It does. A lot of people are, I was on Twitter and, Michigan's playing Colorado State and they're like, I don't like that game. They think you should play Alabama every week. So, but it doesn't really work that way for, the mental and physical well-being of your team and your bank account, your budget code. Right. So you want to keep your budget code in good order. So, it would definitely be easier. I think most people will probably tell you that they want to play tough competition, but at the same time, you kind of want to, you wouldn't mind getting a few easy ones, especially if you got a young team.
Right.
But you have to play the hand you're dealt. You mentioned some closed conferences, and those are the teams you're going to play. And for us, it's and the Grand Valleys and the Wayne States and the Saginaw Valleys. We got to go out and find those opponents and fill that schedule that we can't fill with the depth of teams that we have in the GLIAC.
Sure. All right, Sandy. Well, I hope you have a great trip to Hickory, North Carolina. You will be able to see our South Atlantic columnist, Justin Pulizzi, there. He's a member of the Lenore Ryan broadcast crew, so make sure that you hit him up. But nonetheless, it was great to have you on, and thanks for making the time to be on Inside D2 Football.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Definitely looking forward to this game and to the rest of the season, and tuning in to you guys. Thank you guys for what you do for D2 Football.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks, buddy.
All right. Let's bring everybody back in, guys. So before we move on quickly, he mentioned Lenore Ryan. I had 2 people were at the Lenore Ryan game in this room, and none of them are on our top row right now. So Chris and Justin, what did you think of the Lenore Ryan game before we move on to some other games around Division II?
So I went to this game because I actually was part of the broadcast crew for Virginia State. I was actually on the radio for half of the game, and then I went down the field for the other half. Really, what was really interesting about this game was, Virginia State, the opponent, coming into this game with a new head coach who has won a CIAA championship before. and breaking in new quarterbacks, except for one. And the one quarterback that was on the roster, he really didn't play in this game. So it was a brand new quarterback, a lot of new faces. They actually didn't have their punter either. Punter got hurt, so they had a hard time flipping the field. But Virginia State played Lenore Ryan really, really tough. And it was really the score that you kind of saw at the end of the game was more indicative of what kind of happened in really towards the end of the game, where Virginia State just kind of ran out of steam. Lenore Ryan is definitely not the team that I think we're all used to seeing, with Grayson Willingham now exhausting eligibility and trying to find a successor or quarterback. Kind of what Sandy talked about with Austin Cagle, who was he was a third string, and his one pass that he passed for last year was for negative yards. His first pass of this game was an interception.
Right.
And so, he struggled quite a bit. They tried to get the run game going. It took quite a long time to get that run game going. And to try to do that against a team that's as strong and physical, as fast as Ferris, is just not going to work. So and the defense, they have a lot of they lost a lot on defense, but they do have some key pieces that came back, particularly at linebacker.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same Lenore Ryan team. It's one that is probably going to lean heavily on the run. They played 3 running backs last night, but they don't really have the passing firepower right now. It's just not there. I mean, the passing touchdowns that they had were really because of like blown coverages on Virginia State's end more than anything. I mean, that's just kind of what it is right now. So they have the talent, they have the pieces, but until they can resolve the quarterback situation, I think it kind of brings them sort of down to earth, and certainly in the South Atlantic.
So Justin, Chris had touched on some things that Lenore Ryan had not done that well, but they obviously played pretty good defense. One of the things, a player that I was not that familiar with, but when we started doing and in the middle of research for the Elite 100 that I came across and was extremely impressed with, was John Ross May. And I don't know, I haven't even looked at the stats from this game, but tell me about his game and him as a player.
Well, the thing that stood out to me about John Ross May was just he was around the football almost every play on defense.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Their defense gets to the football and they get there in a hurry. But every time you look, first, second guy there is John Ross May. He had an interception last night, and just he's a ball hawk. He gets to the ball. He makes things happen. They wrap up. They rip on the football. They had a couple turnovers, ripping the ball out from Virginia State. So he's a guy that is a spark plug for their defense, and it's someone they can build on. Early here in this year until they're able to get it rolling. Defensively, but again, he's a guy that every time you look up, he's there. He's at the ball, and actually, my broadcast partner and I were talking about that. I mean, it's just how quick he's there.
All right, well, guys,
only a sophomore. I just want to throw that out. He's only a sophomore.
Yes, 100%. You're right, Ferg.
Your evaluation was exactly what I saw when I looked at video from last year, and I was incredibly impressed with him, which Matt and Chuck can verify, because I've mentioned his name several times. But let's go ahead and focus large again instead of narrowly on that game. What else happened last week, guys? I've got a list of a lot of things. Let's talk about them and hit them. If you want to chime in, chime in. Valdosta State struggled a little bit with Kaiser, but won 36-21. They're a pretty good NAIA team, but the Blazers struggled more than I thought they would.
I just want to mention here that Valdosta was like down in the second quarter in this game. I mean, that's how much they struggled.
Sure.
Yeah. It was a 7-3 game. And that, basically if you took a look, Ivory Durham had some challenges in the passing game. At one point, I think he was 6 of 21 in the first half, and just wasn't himself. And I think Kaiser had a lot to do with it. I can tell you the Valdosta staff leading up to this game, when I chatted about them, They said that this is a real good NAIA team, and in such a way where they said that players like the tight end, their front was going to be better than a lot of people realized. And they were having some challenges, no doubt about it. They came on us in the second half. Valdosta did and kind of got things going. Kaiser didn't go away though,
Right.
And they were kind of staying within striking distance. And then at the end, Valdosta was able to kind of take it from there. Does that make us think that Valdosta is a potential championship team after seeing that? It's kind of hard to feel that way. But at the same time, you look at the other side and you say, I bet that they would have rather have been tested a little bit here to know what they got. Coach Justin, what are your thoughts? Obviously you schedule games, and Valdosta doesn't have the easiest time getting games in the first place because people aren't signing up to play them a lot. But at the same time, do you come away with a little bit more in a game like this?
Well, you're 100% right. First of all, they do have a hard time scheduling games. It's not the easiest. But I think the thing that we haven't taken into account with, and I think we've kind of talked about it, and y'all talked about it a little bit last week on the show, was, we're talking about teams that have had new coaches, whether it's Bowie State, whether it's Valdosta State. You have a new coach. But the other component to this that we're not talking about is the transfer portal. So not only do you have a new coach in a situation with a team that was successful last year, but now you have the transfer portal, and you really don't know how they're going to pan out until you see the first couple games. And so I haven't really looked over the Valdosta State roster this year, but I can tell you though that with a new coaching staff, you obviously have some transfer portal, both guys in and guys out. And so it's going to take some time for them to find their footing and gel together as a unit. So I'm not necessarily surprised to see that some of those teams may have had sluggish starts, especially in the first quarter. But I think when you set games up, you want to play games that are going to help you later in the season, right? Like you don't want to play a game where you blow somebody out 42-0. You want to be tested. And so whether it's a good NAIA team, because there are some really, really good NAIA teams out there,
Right.
or, an FCS team, you want to play tough competition where you find out what your team is made of. You also get to find out what your coaching staff is made of, right? Because for Valdosta, that's a whole new staff. And so you have all new guys working together, working out kinks and communication and communicating with the staff, with the players. And so there's a lot of variables there that you don't look at. And then again, to me, you throw the transfer portal in there, and that just, that's a whole new element of questions that have to get answered. So I think good competition's good, especially early, but I think it also helps you work through kinks. And so sometimes a tight game early isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Well, and what's funny, guys, is Kaiser plays, was it Mississippi College this week, I think?
Mm-hmm.
So, we're going to get another chance to see how good was that team, that kind of thing as well. How about what are some of the other thoughts you guys had about games like, how about West Texas? I know we all picked them, but did we all think it was going to go down like that?
It didn't shock me. It really didn't. I thought they were going to win it comfortably. I think, what was the final, 44-6?
Right.
I didn't think it would be that bad, but yes, I did think West Texas was going to win that comfortably. So that wasn't a shock to me. And I had West Texas in my preseason top 25. So I think with some teams that lost to unranked opponents, I think that you'll probably see West Texas maybe in our poll, probably in the other polls as well.
What about Kutztown? 3-0 loss to Assumption.
That's unforgivable. Flat out unforgivable. And I feel comfortable saying that because I have spoken so positively about Jim Clements at Kutztown and his staff. I think that they're wonderful, wonderful coaches. They've done a great job building a culture and building a program there. That is absolutely unforgivable. You cannot go on the road, play a good team, give up a field goal, and lose. That's it.
Another. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Justin.
So passionate.
Well, no, and that's a game that I don't know about y'all, but I looked at that score, Chuck. I looked at that score 3 or 4 times. I'm like, I hit the refresh button. I'm like, surely that game's not over 3-0. I don't know the last time I saw a 3-0 ball game.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it like 3-0 in the first quarter?
Yes. Assumption kicked a field goal with like 5 to 6 minutes left in the first quarter, and that was it.
All right. So let's talk about some other things that happened. Ohio Dominican beats Findlay. It was one of our pick'ems. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a conference game, so that's will have an effect on the GMAC race. Other interesting things that happen. Slippery Rock, we were pretty critical of them. They did really well. Beat a Wayne State team that might not be as good as it has been in the past or very good at all, but nonetheless, Slippery Rock was dominant in that game. What else we got? Here's one thing I'd like you to touch on, Chuck. 5 of 7 teams that made the playoffs last year in Super Region 1 lost their season opener.
Yeah.
So the only
huh?
two that did not would have been Slippery Rock and Shepherd that we already mentioned, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the other 5 all lost their season opener. That doesn't mean that the season's a loss, obviously, but certainly a very interesting stat line.
Okay, and speaking of them, Tyson Bagent, we made a joke about how many touchdown passes he would have, Chuck. You were right. You said 5. He had a pretty good game.
He did. It was a little bit of a slow start actually for Shepherd, but they were never really challenged in that game.
So, and speaking of touchdown passes, one would normally not associate Harding with touchdown passes, but they threw what might be a season high 3 touchdown passes in one game when they beat East Central.
They had 3 pass completions in the game. The quarterback was 3 for 6. All 3 pass completions were touchdowns. They only had 5 all of last year.
That quarterback rating has to be incredibly high. So, all right, you guys had touched on it a little bit before, but potential shakeup of top 25. I think it could be very interesting this week, and maybe we'll transition to actually focusing on next week. But CSU Pueblo, Mankato, West Texas, Pitt State all win. Is it possible we see a big shakeup, bigger than normal maybe? What are your opinions, man?
Chuck, I found, you and I kind of chatted a little bit earlier today, and I mentioned that I still got to do my top 25 poll. I've found myself at about midway through and kind of stopping and saying, what do I do from here? Because I felt pretty good about above that area. And there may even be some shakeup in the top 5 because realistically, the top 5 was pretty much in order of finish last year or something close to it. So the first real info or stuff to go by was these first games. So I mean, you may see some teams move around a little bit because of the fact we've gotten to see our first game action of those squads. Now that all said, I started looking at some of the teams like Brandon mentioned. I was looking at anything from West Texas to Pueblo to, is Mankato making a return? So I was taking a look at some of those teams because I didn't feel real sure about a good amount of the performances for the back half of what I already had in the poll. Chris, I see you shaking your head. You kind of seeing where I'm going there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you had a lot of teams 16 to 25 that do they even stay in the poll at this point?
Right.
I mean, because there's so many teams that played, ranked teams and actually won or they won pretty big. So I think the bubbles are teams like Western Colorado. Do they stay in? New Haven, yeah, they lost to a ranked team. Do they stay in or do they get really punished? There's a lot of question marks in that back half of that poll.
Well, what are your opinions, man? I think Western Colorado is an interesting one to look at because they were ranked. It wasn't like they were 23; they were in the teens.
Yeah, 15, I think.
Yeah,
but they just lost so badly. I mean,
right.
And now you have a resurgence of Pueblo, and you have Mines as possibly the 2 teams that people are considering to be ranked. So does the RMAC really have 3 ranked teams? I don't see it.
Yeah, and you know what, Brandon? When I take a look at it, and I'll be real transparent, guys, I had Mines as my second best team. I had them at number 2 going into last week. Losing at Grand Valley, pretty much almost everybody else is going to do that too. Mm-hmm. I moved them down to 5. I didn't think it was like some big jump where they go to like 8 or 9 or something like that, that there's an automatic drop of a certain amount of spots if you lose and that you only you can only be passed by a team if you lose a game. I don't buy into all that. And so when we're looking at all this, and this is last week's that we're talking about right in front of us here. There was plenty of teams that I wasn't overly impressed with in the back half. So I have teams, Brandon, frankly, like a Mankato. I bumped them up to about 18 on the list. I had West Texas jumping in at 15. I kicked Western Colorado out of the club. I mean, I was looking at some of those saying no, And if you lost to a ranked team, that's a little bit different in my opinion than just losing to teams where and really getting beaten by 30, 40 points.
Right.
I mean, my goodness.
Right. I think that's a factor. And I do appreciate your approach, Whit. I've stated many times that I hate when people treat a top 25 poll as standings or, it's an opinion poll that's different every week. And there's lots of different factors and it needs to be different every week. And I hate they're number, just because you're the defending national champion doesn't mean you should even be ranked number one. That's nonsense.
Now, Chuck, let me ask. I didn't inquire, Chuck, with you about your specific poll, but I guess I'm doing it now in front of everybody. So, how did you view it when you were taking a look at it yourself?
I haven't finalized my poll yet, but there's a couple teams that I already know are going to fall out of the top 25 as I have it. I was already pretty harsh on Kutztown, so I just don't think that you stay in the rankings after a loss like that.
Sure. So
they'll drop out of my poll. Western Colorado, which is a team that I liked all of last year and really stumped for. Yeah, after getting stomped like that on the road at 15, I think you fall out of the poll. I already had a couple teams in my poll that are going to move up a little bit. But I do have to try to figure out who am I moving in if I'm moving 2 or maybe even 3 teams out. But I will also say some of those teams that lost are not going to fall out of my poll. Mine's is going no further than 5 or maybe 6.
Right.
New Haven could be on the bubble. They may or may not make it. Still in my poll. Bowie State's going to go up probably several spots in my poll. Mankato, I think, was pretty impressed. I might move them in, but Pueblo for sure, I think, is going into my top 25.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's take a little break. I want to thank everybody who supports the site. And then when we come back on the other end, we'll talk about our pick 'em last week, and we will pick this week's selections. Just wanted to take this opportunity to thank those who have supported D2 Football this year. D2 Football is free, but it isn't cheap. Your support helps offset our expenses and allows us to expand our coverage. If you like what we're doing, please consider supporting us. Visit d2football.com/support. Or if you want to do it the old-fashioned way, click contact on the website to find our mailing address. But again, thank you for supporting D2 Football. All right, and again, thank you for everybody who does support us in any way, financially or otherwise. Let's look at the pick'em from last week and be ready to cringe, guys, because there's a lot of red on this graphic that's about ready to come up. So 3-2 is embarrassingly the best that any of us did. 3-2. Usually we had 4-1s or 5-0s. Obviously, we have a tie for first with a bunch of mediocre people, and then one really brought up the rear with an incredibly embarrassing 1-4 week.
I had to pick up the slack since Justin didn't pick last week.
Well, hey, I'm undefeated. I'm undefeated going for the record.
You're winless.
Hey, I didn't say that. I just said I was.
Okay. Well, undefeated. I mean, look how close it was, though. I mean, mine's almost came through for you, and you would have been the only one that got that one. So,
I know. I threw the paper away and everything. I had rage going, and I thought, they saw that, and then they were inspired, and the whole thing. Yes.
So let's go ahead and before we get to our pick 'em this week. Last week we talked about what Matt labeled an undercard and a main card. And we've got some great games again this week. On the undercard, first we'll start in the Great American Conference, Southeastern Oklahoma at Harding. thoughts, man?
Well, Southeastern was a team that I had in my top 25 coming into the season. They got quite a scare from Arkansas Tech
Right.
this past weekend. Actually got that. They pushed them into overtime. Southeastern did prevail, got the wins. That's all that matters. That was kind of one of those games. Whit and I talked a couple times over the weekend about some of these results. Is one team a little better than we thought they were? Is another team maybe not as good as we thought they were? Is the truth somewhere in the middle? Not really sure what to take away from that. Maybe Arkansas Tech is going to be a little bit better this year. I still really like that Southeastern team. Winning against Harding last year was really what put them on the map. That was a huge upset. They had started 3 or 4-0, and it was that win over Harding that really put them on the map. So I give them a great shot. I think they'll be a better team this week. I think I give them a great shot. Harding has some issues. Their coach actually talked after their game. The way they won that game, 3 touchdown passes, and then they fumbled 3 times. That is not the formula for Harding. So they've got some things to button up, but it's hard to go against Harding at home. I would go with the Bisons.
Okay, a good game. I think one that will have a factor in the MIAA race. Pittsburgh State is at Nebraska Kearney. Matt, I think maybe this is a litmus test for where is Pitt State at.
Yeah, this is a really good game, and you guys know I'm high on Kearney. Okay, so I'm going to take Kearney in this matchup because I think there's a real chance that they could win the conference this year. And I know that people are throwing things, down in Maryville at that comment, but I can deal with that. Now, does anybody what does everybody else think? Are we kind of going to be divided on this one?
I think I'd go Gorillas in this one.
It is on the road. It is on the road at Kearney. I don't think UNK played that well against Missouri Southern. That was, it ended up being like 24-7, 24-3, something like that. But it was a very tight game for a very long time. Sure. And now Kearney's done that before, but they did lose a running back, which can be a factor. If you can focus on one guy, typically you can stop one guy on an offense. But I think it's a true pick 'em.
Justin, who do you like on that one?
The team that you didn't pick.
Okay, I'm good with that.
I mean, the record shows that if I go opposite you, I'd stand to be pretty good.
Play the odds.
Exactly.
All right. Looking at other games in the PSAC, Slippery Rock is at Westchester. 2 weeks ago, I thought that was an interesting game. I think now it's not quite as interesting as it was. I thought Slippery Rock was pretty impressive in game 1. Does anybody think that there's a chance that Westchester knocks them off?
I do think it's a fun matchup. I went to the Westchester Bentley game on Friday night. Westchester's defense is good. Probably a little bit better than most people would think. They have one of the best linebackers in the country. I think Westchester's defense against Slippery Rock's offense is a good matchup. I don't think Westchester has the offense to hang.
Okay.
I can go there, yep.
All right. Ashland pulled the upset in Notre Dame College. Now they face Findlay.
A wounded Findlay. They're 0-1. They're fighting for their lives now, and Ashland's flying high. So I'll ride or die with the Eagles. I'll go Ashland.
All right. And then
I'm going to go with that too.
Okay. I mean, we're not picking them, so it doesn't matter. But
oh, that's right. We're just talking about it. That's right.
Yeah, that's right. We're just talking about it. And then
I'm picking it anyway.
The last game on the undercard, Bemidji State at Augustana. What do you think, Whit?
Well, I think I'll be going to that game. And
can you make the drive?
Okay, so this is one of those deals where Augustana is 1-0. But their offense did not look like the Augustana we would have expected, and I'm a little concerned about that. And I think Bemidji State's going to feel like this is a must-win game. So I'd like Bemidji to rebound in this one. How does it? I mean, so this could be a game where others think differently. Anybody like Augie in this one?
Yes.
Oh, what I thought and was surprised that Augustana did not throw more.
Yeah, the new quarterback from Montana State transfer throws a few picks early. Then they only throw 14 passes the whole football game. He ends up running the ball 12 times, along with their, really good offensive line and great running back room. I kind of got the feeling like they went into let's win this survival mode. Like we don't need to, go crazy with the passing game right now. Let's work out some tweaks and let's escape here and then go from there. So that's kind of a little bit of the concern I have right now is I think Bemidji knows a little bit more about what they got. Chuck, what's your take?
I like Augie. It just kind of feels like, that loss to Mankato is going to be pretty deflating for Bemidji. And not that they can't bounce back from that. Of course they can. But I feel like it could be the kind of thing that lets a season get away from them before it really even gets on track. So I'm going to go with Augie in this one, especially since it's a home game. The real question is what drive-through are you hitting before you get over to the stadium, Whit?
Yeah, there's quite a few different choices. I'll make sure I keep the Twitter universe abreast of all that. Maybe I'll just go eat there instead at the game. But how about
Ferg? What's the go-to? You got to have a go-to on the way in.
Well, there's Wendy's. There's a few others. I've got a variety of go-tos. Once I start going someplace a little too much, Justin, we got to change it up a little bit. It's kind of like me with freeze pops lately. We're gonna have to change that soon.
He calls me when he's going through the drive-through all the time, and I usually hear the people at the drive-through saying, "Hi, Whit."
Not even like
by name.
Not even.
No. He usually puts.
Berg, don't even laugh at that. You did a whole show through a Wendy's drive-through.
Whatever it takes.
You are not one to throw stones ever again, Ferg.
All right, guys. Let's go ahead and focus on this week's pick'em. These are the 5 games that we will discuss. So we've got Angelo State at Colorado Mines, Bowie State at Saginaw Valley, Ferris State and Lenore-Rhine, Grand Valley at CSU Pueblo, and Minnesota Duluth at Minnesota State.
Do we get to pick these games, Brandon?
What? We do get to pick these games. Yes, we do.
Okay, good.
Yes. All right.
Can we make a rule that Whit has to pick first, though, so we all know who to pick?
Oh.
Our audience tunes in for the suspense of me picking last, I think.
All right.
Gotcha.
Let's go ahead and start with Minnesota Duluth and Minnesota State.
Can we get our heads down the side of the shot or no?
I think maybe I don't know. We can on this. Hold
okay,
up.
I wasn't sure.
There's probably a way to do it, but I'd have to move it over to the other screen, and it's too much to try to do while I'm trying to engineer and host.
I'm like a poker player. I'm reading the others right now. That's what it's going on.
I got you. So Minnesota Duluth at Minnesota State. I will start. I'm going to go with Duluth. No, I'm going to go with the Mavericks. I think it's a toss-up game. I don't know that I really learned what I needed to about either team in their first game. So I'll go with the Mavericks. All right. Matt, you go. No, do you want to go last or you cool? You want to go now?
At last.
You want to go last? Okay, Chuck.
I agree, Brandon. I think it's a true toss-up. I'm going to go with Mankato.
Okay. Justin.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good feel for this one going into this, but I'm going to say Mankato as well.
Okay. K. Ferg.
I'm going with Duluth.
Okay. All right, and then Matt.
And getting a chance to watch Duluth, I'm not quite sure they're where they want to be just yet. They played a closer game with Southwest Minnesota State than most would have assumed. So I'm going to go with Mankato at home. Maybe I'm buying into this rebound thing a little bit.
Okay. Very good.
Calm down for it.
Okay. Let's go ahead and let's do Bowie State at Saginaw Valley. All right. And I was first last time. Matt, you go first this time.
I am pretty big on Saginaw Valley this year. I was watching their media day. Their coach had me inspired. And so I'm going to take them to beat the brakes off of Bowie. Ooh. And I like them winning this game by a few scores. I think Saginaw is a team to look out for this year, people.
Okay. Chuck.
I like Saginaw as a team too, Whit, but I'll tell you what, defense travels,
I
and
know.
sometimes it's hard to get firsthand impressions out of your mind. But I was just so impressed with a lot of things I saw with Bowie. I'm going to go with the Bulldogs.
Okay. Justin.
This hurts me to say this, Whit. I'm actually going to agree with Whit on this one. I think Saginaw Valley. I don't know by multiple touchdowns, but I'm going to take Saginaw Valley at home.
Okay. I will pick Saginaw Valley as well, and we will end with CIAA columnist Chris Ferguson.
Because of death. Bowie State. I mean, look, Saggy's probably going to be better this year for sure. And I actually saw there was a Bowie State wide receiver who transferred to Saginaw Valley. I guess they kind of liked what they saw last year. I just think that Bowie State's going to be really inspired to keep this going, and they do play just as good on the road as they normally do at home.
All right. The next game we are going to pick will be Ferris State at Lenoir-Rhyne. All right. And Chuck, wait, did you start out? Yeah, Chuck, you go ahead and start out. Ferris State, Lenoir-Rhyne.
I just don't see it for Lenoir-Rhyne. I don't think that they're ready for it yet. Maybe if they played later in the year, it could be different. But no, I like Ferris in this one.
Okay. Justin will pick last. Chris.
Ferris. I mean, come on. After what I saw yesterday, Lenoir-Rhyne is they're just a step down from where they were last year, and it's just not there. I don't think it's going to be there.
Okay, I'm going to pick the Bulldogs. Matt.
I really liked what Chuck said about that and took some of my ammo, but I'm going the same way. I just feel that Ferris is going to be able to make them. I think they're going to have some trouble with the run, and I don't think they're going to be able to throw much on Ferris. So I think that's going to potentially make things a little one-sided.
Okay, Justin, don't let me down.
So, what's that?
I said, don't let me down.
Oh, no. I'm actually going to take Lenoir-Rhyne in this game, and here's why. I think your biggest growth as a team comes from week 1 to week 2. So I look forward to seeing a much improved Lenoir-Rhyne team this week than what we saw on Saturday night. And I also think that, and this is something we haven't talked about, the game kicks off mid-afternoon. The heat and humidity down here in North Carolina is going to be a little bit different than what Ferris State is used to. So I think that may play into it as well. So I look for Lenoir-Rhyne to win this one.
Yeah, right. That's a fair point.
I think the heat and the humidity are going to play a bigger role than people have talked about.
No, Brandon, they think it's cold in the upper Midwest in the summer, apparently.
Well, let's be honest.
I talked about the Bowie and New Haven game. I think it had a really significant factor.
I was at a football game in Mankato, Minnesota to open the season. And on a Friday night, we were listening to like a high school broadcast, and the announcer said, "Oh, the boys better make sure they hydrate. It's like 72 out." So I think this is a true story.
My son had his game this last week on Thursday. It was 92 with humidity. So I'm just saying.
Well,
Ferris gonna be fine.
All right. Let's go ahead and pick Grand Valley at CSU Pueblo. Justin starts this one.
This is a tough one. This is a tough game right here. Gosh, if you ask me later in the week, I don't know that I'm going to have the same answer as I'm going to have right now. I'm going to take Grand Valley, though. I thought they played a very, very tough Mines team week 1, and I'm going to stick with Grand Valley here going into week 2.
Would you like to reconsider your pick there, Justin? Can we fast forward to the end of the week? Were you going to change it?
No, I didn't say I was. I said I might.
Daggum. Okay.
Well, now, hey, I may change it after you make your pick, though.
All right. Berg.
Pueblo played, who was it? Midwestern State.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wonder how good Midwestern is now after the way that they also lost.
Mm-hmm.
And when you compare that to, Grand Valley playing a top 5 team and gutting it out if they get into a gutted out type situation at Pueblo, they already have the experience here early in the season. So I like Grand Valley in this game.
Okay. My turn. I think the most interesting part of this game is the unknown part of this game. In the interview with Matt Mitchell, they said that CSU Pueblo throws it better than they did in the past. In addition, he said his team has some work to be done in the secondary, or at least some experience to be had in the secondary. I think that makes it an unknown. I'm going to pick Grand Valley, but I think that makes it a very interesting game. The fact that there are unknowns in both the strengths and weaknesses of those two teams.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Matt.
I have that same concern. I also have a little bit concerned with the fact that Grand Valley just had a really emotional game, and they just went through all of that. Mm-hmm. And then they got to jump on a plane and head out to Colorado to play a team that's they're not going to know as much what they're playing because there's been some changes, that Pueblo's had with the coaching staff and so forth. And apparently they're now becoming a team who can throw the ball, which is not stuff that we've talked about with Pueblo much in the past. Matter of fact, it's kind of been their Achilles heel. Is the fact that they
was John Dawson the last one that they had that was really good, the 14 quarterback?
Well, I mean, and that's been a while. So I mean, that's and they weren't really explosive per se in the passing game then. Right. They looked like they were, so that's a bit of a concern. So my mind's buffering a little bit over that whole situation with Pueblo. But when I then Chuck's rolling dice over there. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take Grand Valley to win on the road. I did think they're one of those teams this year.
Okay. And Chuck, you're the last selection.
Yeah, I think it could be a very similar kind of game to what we saw last week with Mines and Grand Valley, and I like Grand Valley to win it.
All right.
That's all you got there, that one?
That's all I got.
Okay. All right. He's not the best.
No, there are some other factors there. I think what you mentioned, having to get on an airplane. These flyaway games are not routine for Division II teams, depending on who you are and what conference you play in. They're not that routine. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a different experience. The Thunder Bowl there in Pueblo is pretty cool. I know Ferg was just out there a couple of weeks ago. Should be a really good atmosphere for a game. Could be tough, but I think Grand Valley wins it.
All right. Our last game to pick this week, Angelo State at Colorado Mines. Chris Ferguson, you start us off.
Mines.
Okay. I'm going to go with the Ore Diggers as well. Interesting game. Wasn't this a playoff game last year?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. I mean, this
went to that game.
This is very interesting. So I think that'll be a fun one to take a look at, which is obviously why I said let's pick it last. So, Matt, what are your thoughts?
This is a tough one. I think Angelo's going to want to get back at him. Angelo's very athletic team. I just think that Mines is going to find a way to gut this out, especially at their own place.
Okay. Chuck?
I really, really like both of these teams. I think the deciding factor is just the sense of urgency that Mines will have because of coming into the 0-1. Angelo won last week, so I think that sense of urgency and just their overall fortitude is going to get it done for them. I like Mines.
Okay. And Justin, you'll be the last selection.
Mines. I think there's revenge on their mind, but I think Mines is going to pull it out at home.
Interesting. I thought Angelo would get some picks on that one, but
I was really close actually.
Okay.
It's a toss up to me. I absolutely can see a path to victory for Angelo, no doubt.
Right. When we pick these games, we're not only trying to pick the best games, but we're trying to pick games where we believe that there would be different choices, that people would make different choices. It's interesting that three of them, very consistently, we all believe the same team will win, which, judging by our selections and our records last week, it means all those teams will probably lose. All right, guys, let's go ahead and look through the comments really quickly, and then we'll shut her down. Help me scroll through the comments to see if we there's anything we need to
While you're
address.
looking for
Yeah.
that,
Go ahead, Matt.
real quick, Massey actually has Mines winning 24-23.
Oh, wow.
So that speaks to some of that.
Okay. Here's one for Chris.
Somebody already picked him up. It wasn't me, but I mean, he definitely had a pretty good game this past weekend, and I think that's the beauty of fantasy. You just don't really know who's gonna really kind of just come out the gate with really great performance in week one with all the movement, transfer portal, and people coming down to Division II and people coming off of red shirts, things like that. So it wasn't me, but somebody did pick him up.
Okay. There's a lot of discussion about paywalls, and let me make a general comment. I don't have a problem with most paywalls. I understand that they're providing a product and somebody will have to pay for that product. It's how it's structured that can be an issue. There is one situation where we figured it out. If we had to follow every Division II team like it's structured in that conference, it would be like $5,000 a month for us to follow on video. And now I understand that there's 175 teams, but still, they need to be flexible, and the price point needs to be correct. In some conferences, it's not that way right now.
Somebody asked if Bowie State is 76 points better than West Virginia Wesleyan. Yes, they are. That's in reference to Saginaw Valley having played Wesleyan last week. Yes, they are.
But the Stapler says, in fairness, not many TV networks are willing to cover D2 sports. Not many TV networks are willing to cover anything that's not the absolute mainstream, but they people who understand the structure understand that they actually are required to have the ability to cover FBS football, et cetera, et cetera. There's not money in lower levels of football to be made, or a lot of money to be made that would facilitate us having a D2 game of the week on ESPN. As cool as that would be, we all understand that, I believe. But
there was one for a while. CBS Sports used to do a Thursday night D2 game of the week, and I'm sure that was not financially successful.
Yeah, and that's about 10 years gone now at this point. Yeah,
right.
Well, and I know that the paywalls are frustrating. I get that, but I will tell you this: as somebody who has seen it and broadcast college football games, runs a sports network at the high school we're at. I'll be honest with you. Like at first I didn't understand the paywall side of it either. But when you realize that there's people that won't go to a game and they're going to sit home, so you either go to the game or you pay for you pay to watch it or you pay for the ticket to go. Either way, you're losing revenue because especially if it's a iffy weather game, people are going to stay home. They're not going to go. So you're going to lose your tickets for your gate. Well, probably not a lot of money, but every athletic department does things different, right? Like, so that money may go to scholarships or operations, or you don't know. But so as frustrating as the paywall is, I think when you look at it in a bigger perspective, like if it was your budget that you were trying to manage, you may feel a little differently. So sure. I get it, as frustrating as it is. And believe me, I hate, when you look at, hey, I want to watch this game or that game, and you have to pay, a fee to watch, not just be able to pay one fee to watch everybody. I get that. But I also think at the other side of it, these colleges are losing money that it doesn't seem like it's a lot of money, but it does add up. It does add up quite a bit. Sure. So I understand it. I don't like it necessarily, but I understand it. So yeah.
Okay. I just want to mention something about the coverage piece, because like in Bowie State's case, some of the bigger TV stations have done a little bit of covering of Bowie State, especially towards the end of the season when they were getting to the championship game, going to the playoffs. And we had some of that footage on the show last year. Virginia Union's interesting because they the CBS affiliate there is going to be broadcasting their home games this year. And then there are some newspaper outlets, at least that cover the CIAA, that have done a really good job, like John Dale with the Winston-Salem Journal. So there is some coverage, and I think it is more than than what you can kind of see in some other conferences. But yeah, it's Division II. It's not a huge audience.
Right. I want to make this one last comment, and then we're going to change the subject. It was reportedly told me that one league was charging almost $30 a month to cover an individual team, which, Justin, you were talking about recapping lost ticket sales. Let's just talk about on the road. Let's say that you're in a big conference and you can't travel from your home, wherever you live, to two opponents a month because you're going to have 2 home and 2 away a month. That's $60 a month because of the structure of the conference. That's $60 a month to see 2 away games. In my opinion, that's too much. It would be different if it was $20 a month for the entire conference or something like that. The price point and the structure is the issue, not having to pay for something. But anyway,
yes.
Whit, address this question because I think you're the one most qualified to answer it.
Well, that narrows it down to most of the show, but keep going.
The question's on the screen.
The question on the screen? We're not talking about.
Oh, is there reading involved? I was told there wasn't going to be math. I was just told there wasn't going to be math.
Make it easy and ask to give you the value menu at Burger King.
Yeah.
Easy, Chuck.
It's not male pattern baldness. We're talking about the NAIA.
Okay, so some are saying that the top NAIA team can compete with the top D2 team. It's the first game, but I'm just wondering about VSU. Well, let's talk a little bit about the NAIA, the first part of that, which is, having been around NAIA football for a fair amount of years, before I started looking at D2, I was talking with a good friend of mine, Barry Fouts, who is probably the best NAIA writer and coverage over the last, 10, 15 years. And he's with Victory Sports Network, great guy. And he and I had lunch last week, and we chatted about there's just not many times where we see this kind of matchup, the top 10 versus top 10, all that kind of stuff. And we talked about the fact that he was pleased with the fact that Kaiser hung around as much as they did, because historically we've seen a lot more of D2 winning those type of football games, sometimes by a healthy margin. Now, I mentioned to him during the game, I said, this would be the biggest upset of an NAIA team with somebody higher than them, probably since University of Sioux Falls went and won at University of North Dakota when they were transferring to FCS, which would have been back in, 2010. And he fully agreed. And that was actually the first thing he thought of as well, because of, being teams higher ranked or teams that were pretty able and mentioned in polls. And Sioux Falls was number 1 in the NAIA that year. So, I mean, does it mean that Morningside, who's currently ranked number 1, how would they do against the top teams in D2? I think Morningside would stick with them and play fairly well. I do think, however, in the NAIA, after you get past about the first 5 teams, which is teams like, Northwestern out of Iowa, Grandview, keep in mind the top 3 teams in the NAIA are all in the state of Iowa. Then you have some teams like Lindsey Wilson and others. I think about the top 5 really would do just fine against some good, ranked type D2 teams. I think it does fall off a fair amount after that. And I would not be surprised if you were to see Kaiser in the semifinals or potentially in the championship game in the NAIA this year.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well,
can I just mention one item? I mean, we kind of, okay.
Yeah, go ahead. No, sorry.
No, Berg, because there's not good NAIA football on the East Coast.
No, there's not. I mean, we kind of saw that yesterday with Southern and Florida Memorial. It's like 86-0. But anyways, and NAIA, speaking of that, Florida Memorial beat Edward Waters. I mean, for whatever that's worth.
So Ed Waters is 2 years removed from NAIA?
Right.
They're SIAC now, but yeah.
Right.
Anywho, when I saw that question, I thought about last year when Division III, was it Wisconsin lacrosse, when they played Grand Valley. And, Wisconsin is generally a pretty good Division III conference. So, you have these Division II schools that can certainly, hang with, at least for a little while, some of the bigger name schools at the Division II level. I mean, that game was like 45-24, but it was close for quite some time.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, we've said it several times, at least I have. It's not as if the top 125 teams are D1, and then the next,
Exactly.
100, South Dakota State almost really played well against Iowa, a Big Ten team, and they're an FCS school. There's different teams at different levels, and it's not clear delineations between any of them. So,
Right.
All right,
Very
guys.
well said. Very well said.
All right. That is going to do it for this week. Before we go, though, need to mention something. A tweet shortly before the show started came across, and a good player for Ouachita Baptist passed away this morning. And his name is Clark Yarborough. He's a defensive lineman for them. By all accounts, a great young man, and I don't know any of the details, but we just wanted to express our condolences to his family and to the Ouachita football family and to the entire community before we left. We're sorry to see it happen, and Clark, may you rest in peace. That'll do it tonight, guys. Thank you for watching.